Ludwig van Beethoven is undoubtedly one of the greatest music composers in world history. He left behind a musical legacy that resonates centuries after his demise. Young Beethoven was born in Bonn, Germany, in the year 1770 AD. He grew up under a high-handed musician and drunkard as a father. Maybe he would have become a prodigy like Mozart, who knows? But the responsibility that was laid on him at a very young age must have prevented that. The irresponsibility of his father and the loss of his job later forced young Beethoven to take over the responsibility of taking care of the home, especially his mother. At the age of 8, he developed skills in playing the violin, and at 11, his teacher, C.G. Neffy, taught him how to play the well-tempered clavier. At 22, despite the huge responsibility of taking care of his mother, he left for Vienna in Austria. Haydn gave him some music lessons as well as other teachers he found there, and soon he became an accomplished and great pianist. He never got married, even though during this period he had numerous love affairs. One thing about Beethoven was that he was a quick-tempered person. This we shall soon see evident in his music. Two incidents affected him deeply. The first was the death of his mother. He loved his mother so much. And the second was the realization that he was gradually getting deaf. Some historians say that his music was loud because he couldn't hear. Some say it was the loud music that contributed to the deafness. Whichever way, he went deaf towards the end of his life. And during that period, he did more of composing music. He died in 1827. Yeah, even though he died, we can't forget the legacy and the rich music he left behind. Talking about Beethoven's music, he wrote more instrumental music than vocal music. You might as well say that Beethoven wasn't as naturally talented in composing music as you would find Mozart doing. He would usually write musical themes and work on them over and over again on his manuscript, so you see a lot of cancellations and reworkings and trying to get what he really wanted. So you find a lot of his scripts rough, and some of them abandoned because he didn't get what he wanted from there and got into something else. And so if you look at his script, you see the internal battle as though he was trying to snatch muse violently from the goddess of music, so to speak. The extreme dynamics of his music and the agitated rhythm you could find frightening for the unprepared ears. Beethoven wrote in a style that had elements of classical music and a departure into an inner world he created within himself, a feature that would soon characterize the upcoming Romantic period. He lived more as a freelance composer, unlike most composers of his time who had fixed jobs. This wasn't usual as many composers survived under aristocratic patronage. And you know what they say, he who pays the piper dictates the tune. Beethoven was really able to write more of what he liked because he didn't really have fixed jobs where they demanded so much from him in writing what they wanted. He wrote what he wanted, and even in cases where people wanted him to deviate, he told them, no, this is what I wanted to write. One of the ways he showed this was through the unexpected use of scherzo in the third movement of his symphony, as opposed to the traditional minuet that you usually find in the third movement of symphonies. he replaced the minuet with a scherzo. Scherzo replaced the minuet that you'd normally find in classical period symphonies. The minuet was slower compared to the scherzo. This is what a scherzo sounds like. Beethoven's symphonies were quite longer than one would expect from a classical composer. He contributed to many of the celebrated genres of his time, such as symphonies, concertos, string quartets, piano sonatas, and he wrote just one opera, which he titled Fidelio. His symphonies include Symphony No. 5 in C minor, which I think is one of the most popular symphonies of his. He also wrote Symphony No. 3 in E flat, which is the Eroica Symphony. He also wrote the Symphony No. 9, the choral symphony, the symphony that ended with a choral music. He wrote Piano Sonata No. 21, Opus 53, String Quartet No. 7, and many other works. Now let's look more closely at some of his compositions. In Symphony No. 5, Beethoven employed a lot of motivic devices, and the piece was in sonata as the form. That's ABA form. In ABA, we have three sections: the exposition, the development, and the recapitulation section. Beethoven used a very compelling rhythmic theme in this music, and it was said that Beethoven described this motif as fate knocking at the door. The piece began with a four-note motif which is introduced with grandeur and pomp, and it was repeated almost throughout the music. The group of four notes were stated firstly and then repeated a second lower. After stating the theme by every member of the orchestra, the string section presented the theme in overlapping form, overlapping themselves. This is followed by the stating of the motif by the whole orchestra, first in descending and then ascending form, and a building up to a climax. Arpeggios in descending order followed, leading to an E-flat major tonality. Horns present a varied form of the theme in the new key, that's E-flat, thereby introducing the coming of a new theme. This new theme was taken by strings and the woodwind in E-flat major, but underneath we have the lower bass instrument, the string bass instrument, stating the original theme below, and this builds up into a descending scaling pattern emphasized by the violin. After this, the development section begins with the horn, which is based on the original theme. The original motif, then stated, was imitated in a rising sequence. The introduction to the second theme, stated earlier by the horn, returns. The rhythmically compelling theme is emphasized by all the parts. A two-note theme drum from the original theme is alternatively played by the woodwind and strings till it reduced to one note. And the orchestra states the main theme again, and this is emphasized, leading to a recapitulation section. The music returns to the beginning. Beethoven, in his music, employed a lot of musical devices and manipulations. Let's talk about enharmonic modulation using an example in his piano sonata, opus 2, number 2, the fourth movement. And in this piece, Beethoven ingeniously applied enharmonic modulation. The piece began with an ascending scalic movement, which we can see coming back in bar 135. In bar 135, the theme recurs with an established A major tonality. After 4 bars, which is bar 139, he reintroduces the theme again, this time using the first inversion of A major, that is having C sharp in the bass. In the next bar, he maintains the bass note C sharp, but builds the chord of A sharp diminished on it with a secondary seventh. In the next bar, he maintains the bass note C sharp, but builds the chord of A sharp diminished on it, and this A sharp is supposed to act as a secondary seventh chord, that is as the chord 7 of degree 2 in the key of A major. Degree 2 is B, so the 7th of degree 2 will be A sharp diminished. A sharp diminished. Meanwhile, an enharmonic respelling of this same chord, which is A sharp, C sharp, E as its members, is seen here as D flat, B flat, and E, which is chord 7 in third inversion, judging in the key of F major, of course with the omission of the third note of the chord. So in the old key, it serves as A sharp, C sharp, E, that's A sharp diminished chord, which naturally will be the chord 7 of degree 2 in A major. But when respelled enharmonically in favor of F major, it will now serve as chord 7 seventh. It will serve as chord 7 seventh in the key of F major. Chord 7 seventh has the members as E, G, B flat, and D flat. E, G, B flat, and D flat. And if we omit the third in this case, we'll have E, omit G, B flat, D flat. And that is what we have here. But in the piece, Beethoven inverted the chord to become D flat, B flat, E. So in F major, this chord serves as chord 7 seventh, chord 7 seventh in third inversion. Because it's a seventh chord, we have a third inversion there. After this, we have the C sharp notes in the bass moves to C natural in the next chord. Same bar, in the same bar where you have this enharmonic respelling with C sharp in the bass, the next chord of the same bar is having C natural as the bass note. And the chord on that C natural is a C dominant seventh. C, E, G, B flat. C, E, G, B flat is the chord, and this creates a motion. So far we have a motion from chord 1 first inversion in A major moving to chord 7 third inversion, so chord 7 seventh in the third inversion in F major, and now we have chord 5 7 in F major, which is C dominant seventh. So we have moved to F major. He started by giving us the first inversion of A major. Of course, we were in A major before. Beethoven started by giving us the first inversion, which is having C sharp in the bass, and from there he created another C sharp, making it the lower note for a chord 7 in F major when respelled enharmonically. So the music moved at that point towards F major from A major. So the second C sharp was a chord 7 in the in F major, and then he followed it by a natural C natural, which gave us chord 5 seventh of F major. Subsequently, Beethoven maintains the C natural note in the bass while alternating between F major in second inversion and C dominant seventh in root position. Beethoven alternated between that till we got to bar 145 when he presents C sharp again in the bass. But this time around, it is seen as C sharp, E, G, B flat, which is actually chord 7 of degree 6, chord 7 of degree 6 in F major. But when respelled enharmonically, it will be A sharp, C sharp, E, G, which can be seen as a diminished seventh built on A. To make this clear, it leads to the next chord, which is B smoothly, like a secondary seventh to it. Note that the E sharp in the treble staff in this bar is a lower neighboring tone. is a lower neighboring tone. So ignore the E sharp and the treble staff. But it moved from A sharp diminished to B, and there it serves as chord 7 of B moving to B. The B being in first inversion graciously led to E in the bass, and it built the chord of chord 1, second inversion in A major. So we have B moving to E, and on that note E in the bass is building second inversion of chord A. And finally, the second inversion of chord A led to another E in the bass, which is the chord 5, which was built chord 5 of A major, and finally chord 1 in A major. So Beethoven has finally established the A major key again. He began from A major, then moved, created, then he created first inversion of A major, having C sharp in the bass. Then from that C sharp, he moved to F major, and then gave C sharp the treatment of C natural. And with that, he had first inversion of chord 1 in F major, moving to root position of chord 5 in F major. He alternated between that before he arrived at 145, where he was able to introduce an A sharp diminished chord, which led to chord 2 in A major, and then from there to chord 5 in A major, and landed finally on chord 1 in A major. So look at the reduction score to be clear the analysis that was made here, how Beethoven moved using enharmonic means from A major to F major and back to A major in this piano sonata. Let us look at other materials and devices used by Beethoven. Here we have the use of Neapolitan sixth chord, and it's created a very special kind of effect. And you will notice that the Neapolitan sixth chord in this passage was used as a predominant chord to the dominant chord, a chord preceding the dominant chord. And finally, it landed on the tonic triad, on the tonic chord, and that created a very special kind of effect. Another material that Beethoven used is the French augmented sixth chord, which he used to create a kind of climax in this piano sonata. And you realize that the chord created a kind of special feeling, special emotion at that point of climax. Watch how all the notes were actually gravitating towards that point, and then when it got to that bar, we're hearing the French augmented sixth chord, and it results finally to chord 5 and then back to chord 1. In this horn sonata, Beethoven uses mode mixture to create his modulation, and we can see that he started by firmly establishing the main key, which is F minor. Started with F minor chord, going to chord 5 in F minor, and then we have a German augmented sixth chord, followed by another chord 5, and then finally landing on chord 1 in F minor. But that F minor chord also acted as a chord that is common to the main key, and then the key he's going to. F minor can be found in the key of F minor as chord 1, and can be found as chord 2 in the key of E flat major. That's the key he's intending to move to. So after striking the F minor chord, next he moves to a chord 2 diminished seventh in third inversion, a chord 2 diminished seventh in third inversion. And that is the chord that actually makes the listener to know that he has left F minor tonality, F minor key, into another key entirely. So the two diminished seventh in third inversion that he struck is actually a chord borrowed from E flat minor. The chord 2 diminished, which is actually F diminished seventh, the chord 2 diminished seventh, which is actually F diminished seventh, is a chord borrowed from E flat minor. But he uses that to establish the tonality of E flat major. He is going to E flat major from F minor, but he's borrowing a chord from E flat minor, which is the chord 2 diminished. Finally, he strikes chord 5 of E flat major and finally lands on chord 1 of E flat major. That's the sequence. He started by establishing the tonality of F minor, strikes a chord in the parallel key of the key he's going to, and finally moves to chord 5 in the key he's going to, and finally lands on chord 1. So we have movement from F minor, a little touch on E flat minor, which is a parallel key to the key he's going to. That's the chord 2 diminished seventh, here as F diminished seventh. Then finally moving to chord 5 of E flat major, not E flat minor this time around. Chord 2 diminished borrowed from E flat minor, moving to E flat major, and finally on chord 1 of E flat major. That is a modulatory tune. Some other compositional devices used by Beethoven are sharp contrast in dynamics, use of appoggiaturas, use of agitated rhythms, introduction of choral section into a symphony, syncopations, and many others.